The Elysium drifted silently through the vast, shimmering expanse of the galaxy. I stood on the bridge, captivated by the ethereal glow of crystalline stars scattered across the inky blackness. Each star sparkled with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse in time with my own heartbeat. It was a sight that filled me with awe and trepidation, a reminder of how small we were amidst the grandeur of the universe. My name is Captain James Harper, and today, we were about to embark on a journey that could change the course of our understanding of reality itself. Captain, we're approaching the first target, Lieutenant Mark Thompson announced, his voice steady and professional, but I could sense an undercurrent of skepticism in his tone. I turned to him, noticing the way his brow furrowed slightly, as if he were weighing the risks against the potential rewards. Mark had always been the cautious one on our crew, a skeptic by nature, but today he seemed particularly uneasy. Good. Dr. Chun, are you ready? I asked, glancing at Dr. Sarah Chun, our brilliant astrophysicist. She was seated at her console, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, her fingers dancing across the controls as she analyzed the data streaming in. Her excitement was palpable, radiating from her like a beacon. Absolutely, Captain. The readings from the crystalline star are unlike anything we've encountered before. I can't wait to get a closer look, she replied, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I could see the passion in her gaze. It was infectious, drawing me in despite my own reservations. All right, listen up everyone, I said, trying to project confidence as I addressed my crew. This mission could lead us to groundbreaking discoveries. These crystalline stars may hold unique energy properties that could revolutionize our understanding of physics. I paused, letting the gravity of my words sink in. But I need you all to remain vigilant. We're traversing uncharted territory, and we can't underestimate the potential dangers. Dangers? Mark scoffed, crossing his arms as he leaned against the console. You mean the unknown? Captain, we're talking about tampering with forces we barely understand. This isn't just a scientific expedition, it's a gamble with the fabric of reality. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Lieutenant, I said, keeping my tone even. Our mission is to gather data and analyze it. We're explorers, not reckless adventurers. We proceed with caution. Mark nodded, but didn't look convinced. I could see the conflict in his eyes, a mix of curiosity and fear. Sarah, on the other hand, was already pulling up holographic displays of the crystalline star's structure. The visuals danced in the air, illuminating her face with vibrant colors. James, look at these patterns, she said, her voice filled with wonder. The crystalline structure seems to resonate with frequencies we've never encountered. This could lead to breakthroughs in energy harnessing and even space-time manipulation. Let's keep our minds focused on the task at hand. First, we need to collect samples and analyze them thoroughly, I reminded her, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. As we prepared for our approach, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into something monumental and potentially perilous. The Elysium glided closer to the crystalline star, its surface shimmering like glass under the light of distant suns. I took a deep breath, steadying myself as we entered the star's orbit. Adjusting trajectory for optimal sampling, Mark announced, his fingers moving deftly over the controls. We'll need to be careful not to disrupt its gravitational field. We wouldn't want to trigger any unpredictable reactions. Good thinking, Thompson, I said, appreciating the way he kept us grounded. Sarah, prepare the sampling equipment. We'll need to act quickly and efficiently. On it, she replied, her enthusiasm undimmed. I watched her work, her focus unwavering as she prepped the ship's systems for the task ahead. Just then, the ship shuddered slightly, and a warning light began to flash on my console. What was that? I asked, my heart racing slightly as I turned to Mark. Power fluctuations detected from the star, he responded, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. It seems to be emitting a surge of energy. Can we stabilize it? I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. I'm trying, but the readings are fluctuating wildly. If we're not careful, we could. He was cut off as the ship jolted violently, alarms blaring throughout the Elysium. Hold on. I shouted, gripping the edge of my console as the ship lurched again. The lights flickered ominously, and the hum of the engines faltered. Power failure in the main system. Sarah cried, her fingers flying over her controls. I'm rerouting backup power, but it's not responding. Mark, get us back on course. I barked, my heart racing as I fought the rising panic within me. The ship was losing stability, and I could feel the tension mounting in the air. We need to regain control. I'm on it. Mark replied, his voice strained as he struggled against the controls. But the energy surge is interfering with our systems. We might have to navigate manually. Focus. I urged, my voice cutting through the chaos. We can't let this star take us down. Everyone, brace for impact. The ship rocked violently as another surge of energy pulsed from a crystalline star, and I felt a sense of impending doom wash over me. I could see Sarah's face pale as she worked desperately to stabilize our systems. James, if we don't regain power soon, we could be thrown off course, she shouted, urgency lacing her tone. I know, Sarah. Just keep trying. I yelled back, my mind racing as I considered our options. We were on the brink of something monumental, but the universe seemed intent on reminding us of our vulnerability. The alarms continued to blare, and I could feel the tension in the room rising. What had begun as a promise of discovery had quickly transformed into a struggle for survival. As the ship shuddered again, I knew this was only the beginning of the challenges we would face on this journey. Stay focused, everyone, I called, rallying my crew amid the chaos. We can figure this out together. We are explorers, and we will not be defeated by the unknown. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I braced myself for what lay ahead. The crystalline stars above us sparkled with an almost mocking brilliance, as if they knew secrets we had yet to uncover. This was just the first step into a realm where science and the very essence of reality would be tested. I could only hope we were prepared for what was to come. As the power flickered back to life aboard the Elysium, a collective sigh of relief washed over the crew. I could see the tension in their faces slowly ease as the hum of the ship's systems resumed. I stood on the bridge, my eyes glued to the view screen where the crystalline star sparkled with an otherworldly glow. It was beautiful and terrifying, a window into the unknown. Captain, we're back online, Lieutenant Mark Thompson announced, his voice steady but with an edge I couldn't quite place. I turned to him, noticing the faintest sheen of sweat on his brow. He had been on edge since the energy surge, and I wondered if the incident had rattled him more than he let on. Good. Let's proceed with the sample collection, I said, trying to project confidence. Dr. Chun, do you have everything you need? Sarah, standing at her station, was already immersed in her readings, her fingers flying over the controls. Yes, Captain. I've recalibrated the scanners to minimize interference from the star's energy field. We should be able to collect the samples without further complications. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I felt a spark of excitement ignite within me as well. All right, let's make history, I declared, watching as everyone sprang into action. Once we secured the samples, Sarah wasted no time in analyzing them. The walls of the lab were lined with instruments that whirred and beeped as they worked, casting an ambient glow against the dark metal surfaces. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her focus intently on the data flooding her screens. Captain, you have to see this, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. I stepped closer, curiosity piqued. What is it? I asked, peering over her shoulder as she highlighted a graph on her display. The crystals vibrate at frequencies that could potentially alter physical laws, she explained, her voice trembling with excitement. It's like they exist in a state that defies our understanding of physics. Alter physical laws? How is that even possible? I asked, my skepticism creeping in. As we know it, light behaves as both a particle and a wave, but these crystals, they seem to be something entirely different. I theorized that they could even manipulate time and space, she said, practically bouncing in her seat. I don't know, Sarah. That sounds risky, Mark interjected, his brows furrowing in concern. We don't know what we're dealing with here. This could be dangerous. Dangerous or not, we're explorers. It's our job to push boundaries, Sarah shot back, her passion igniting a spark of conflict between them. Exploring is one thing, but tampering with forces we don't understand is reckless, Mark replied, crossing his arms as he leaned against the wall. The tension in the air thickened, and I could feel the divide forming between my two officers. Both of you make valid points, I interjected, trying to mediate. But let's not forget that we're in uncharted territory. We need to tread carefully, but we can't let fear hold us back either. Mark sighed, his gaze drifting to the crystalline star visible through the viewport. I just don't want to see any of us get hurt, Captain. We've already seen what happens when we push things too far. Before I could respond, the ship jolted violently, and the lights flickered again. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and I grabbed onto the edge of the console to steady myself. What the hell is happening? I shouted over the cacophony. Power fluctuation in the main reactor. Mark shouted, his fingers dancing over the controls as he tried to regain control. I'm working on it, but the energy from that star is interfering with our systems. Get us stable. I barked, trying to mask my rising panic. I could see the fear in Sarah's eyes, and I knew that we were on the brink of something we didn't fully understand. After what felt like an eternity, the alarm ceased, and the ship settled back into a steady hum. I exhaled deeply, relief washing over me. Status report, I commanded. Mark looked up from his console, visibly shaken but determined. We've stabilized the reactor, but we need to conduct a full systems check. That energy surge was unlike anything I've ever seen. Agreed, I said, glancing at Sarah, who was already back at her station, her fingers flying over the controls again. What about the samples? Still intact, Captain, she replied, her focus unwavering. We need to analyze them as soon as possible. As the crew moved to assess the damage, I felt a growing unease. The energy surge had felt almost sentient, a warning from the crystalline star. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing with forces far beyond our understanding. Later, as the ship returned to its routine, I found myself wandering through the dim corridors of the Elysium. It was quiet, the only sounds coming from the distant hum of machinery. I stopped near the observation deck, where the crystalline star was visible in its full splendor. It pulsed softly, casting prismatic reflections on the walls. Beautiful, isn't it? Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts. I turned to see her standing beside me, her eyes filled with wonder. Yes, it is, I replied, taking a moment to appreciate the sight. But it's also unsettling. I can't shake the feeling that we're not alone out here. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the star. I feel it too. There's something about this place. It's as if the star is watching us. Watching us? I asked, intrigued. You really think so? I don't know how to explain it. It's just a feeling, she admitted, biting her lip thoughtfully. But I've studied enough cosmic phenomena to know that there's often more than meets the eye. Before I could respond, I noticed Mark lurking in the shadows of the corridor, his posture tense. He seemed to flinch at our conversation, his eyes darting between us and the view screen. Everything all right, Lieutenant? I asked, trying to gauge his mood. Just keeping an eye on things, he replied, his voice curt. We should be more focused on our mission, rather than getting lost in fantasies. Mark, it's not a fantasy when we're dealing with something this extraordinary, Sarah countered, her voice rising defensively. Maybe not, but it's dangerous to get too close. We don't know what these crystals are capable of, he shot back, his frustration palpable. I stepped between them, sensing the tension spiraling out of control. Let's all remember we're a team here. We need to work together, not against each other. Mark's expression hardened, and I could see the conflict brewing beneath the surface. Right. Together, he muttered, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I watched as he retreated deeper into the ship's corridors, the shadows seeming to swallow him whole. What's eating him? I wondered aloud. I think he's scared, Sarah said softly, her gaze still fixed on the star. This mission, it's pushing all of us to our limits. Maybe he has reasons to be scared, I mused, recalling the unsettling energy surge. We all do. We've barely scratched the surface of what we're dealing with. Then we need to be vigilant, Sarah replied, her voice steady. We owe it to ourselves and to this mission to uncover the truth, no matter how daunting it may be. As I looked back at the crystalline star, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something monumental. Whatever was happening out here, it was only just beginning, and I could only hope we were prepared for what lay ahead. As we approached the Odyssey, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The ship loomed ahead, its once bright hull now dull and battered, drifting aimlessly in the void. I felt an unsettling chill creep down my spine as we docked. The airlock hissed open, and I stepped into the dimly lit corridor of the Odyssey. My heart raced as I took in the eerie silence that enveloped the vessel. Stay sharp, everyone, I commanded, my voice steady despite the anxiety roiling within me. We don't know what happened here. Sarah followed closely, her brows knit in concentration as she scanned the area with her tricorder. "Captain, the life support systems are still operational, but there's no sign of the crew," she reported, her voice laced with concern. "It's as if they just vanished." Mark lingered behind us, his expression unreadable. I caught his eye, and for a brief moment, I felt a flicker of something. Was it guilt? Before he turned his attention to the corridor, the three of us moved cautiously, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. We made our way to the bridge, where the control panels flickered with a faint, ghostly light. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something sacred, something we weren't meant to see. As I reached the captain's chair, I noticed a series of logs displayed on the main screen, the last entry dated just days before. "Let's see what they have to say," I muttered, tapping a command to play the log. A holographic image of Captain Ned Morgan materialized before us, his face lined with desperation. "If anyone finds this message, heed my warning. The crystals, they're not what they seem. We thought we could harness their power, but it's driving us mad. We've seen things." The recording crackled and cut off, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. "Madness," Sarah echoed, her voice trembling. What did he mean by that? I could feel Mark's presence behind me, his posture tense. "It's just a warning. It could be paranoia. The stress of deep space travel can do that to a crew," he replied, attempting to sound rational. But I sensed a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "Paranoia doesn't explain an entire crew disappearing," I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "We need to find out what happened here. Let's check the rest of the logs." We continued to sift through the recordings, piecing together fragments of chaos. The crew had become increasingly obsessed with the crystals, their fascination twisting into an insatiable hunger. Hallucinations plagued them, turning their dreams into nightmares. The final entries were nothing short of horrifying, filled with frantic pleas for help and cryptic warnings about the crystal's true nature. "Sarah," I began, my voice lowering as I turned to her, "do you think these crystals could have some kind of consciousness? Something that feeds off their fear and madness?" She nodded slowly, her eyes wide with realization. "It's possible. The energy signatures we recorded from the star suggest that the crystals emit more than just power. They may resonate with the emotional states of those around them." A sudden flicker of movement caught my eye, and I spun around just in time to see Mark retreating toward a shadowy corridor. "Mark, where are you going?" I called out, but he didn't respond. "Let him go, James," Sarah urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been acting strange ever since we collected those samples. Maybe he needs some space." I hesitated, torn between my instincts and my trust in the crew. "No, we need to stay together. I'll go after him." I followed Mark, my footsteps echoing ominously in the deserted passage. As I rounded a corner, I found him standing in a small storage room, staring intently at a container filled with shards of crystal. "Mark," I exclaimed, my voice firm. "What are you doing?" He turned to me, his expression unreadable. "I'm just examining them, Captain. These crystals could change everything." "Change everything? Or destroy everything?" I countered, anger flaring within me. "You can't be serious about trying to harness their power after what we've just seen on the Odyssey." "I know what I'm doing, James," he replied, his voice low and intense. "You don't understand the potential here. We could be legends. Imagine the advancements in technology, the power we could wield. We could. At what cost?" I interrupted, stepping closer, wanting to reach him, to break through the haze of obsession that clouded his judgment. "Look at what it did to the crew of the Odyssey. They lost their minds, Mark. Is that what you want?" For a moment, his resolve faltered, and I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I just want to be the one who makes a difference," he admitted, his voice cracking. "You can make a difference without resorting to this madness," I urged. "Let's focus on understanding the crystals, not exploiting them. Together, we can do this." He stared at me, a battle raging in his mind. After what felt like an eternity, he finally sighed and stepped back from the container. "Fine, but you have to promise me that we'll explore every possibility. I can't just let this opportunity slip away." Relief flooded through me, but it was short-lived. The moment was shattered as a low hum reverberated through the Elysium. What was that? Sarah's voice echoed from the corridor, filled with alarm. I rushed back to the bridge, where the crew was already gathering. "Everyone, report," I ordered, feeling the tension in the air thicken. As we stood there, the hum crescendoed into a pulsating rhythm that seemed to resonate with our very beings. Crew members began to clutch their heads, their faces twisting in agony. "Captain, I'm seeing things," one of the engineers yelled, panic rising in his voice. "Shadows, they're everywhere." "Stay calm," I commanded, but my heart raced. I exchanged a worried glance with Sarah, who was already analyzing the readings on her tricorder. "It's the crystals," she shouted, her voice tense. "They're reacting to our fear. We need to find a way to stabilize the ship." Before I could respond, the lights flickered, and the room plunged into darkness. A chill swept through the air, and I felt the unmistakable sensation of something lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. "James." Sarah's voice trembled, and I turned to see her eyes wide with terror. What if the legends are true? What if the crystals are alive? The thought sent a jolt of fear through me. I had come to uncover the mysteries of these stars, but now it felt as if we had awakened something far more sinister than we could ever comprehend. "Focus," I shouted, trying to rally the crew. "We need to work together and—" But my words were swallowed by the escalating chaos as crew members succumbed to their hallucinations, and I realized we were facing a darkness that threatened to consume us all. The tension in the cramped confines of the Elysium was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. I stood at the center of the command deck, the soft hum of the ship system surrounding me like a distant, comforting lullaby, but it was drowned out by the escalating argument between Captain James Harper and Lieutenant Mark Thompson. The crystalline stars outside glimmered brightly, oblivious to the chaos brewing within our vessel. "Mark, you need to understand the potential danger here." James's voice boomed, reverberating against the metallic walls. He was a man of conviction, but I could see the frustration etched onto his face. "These crystals are not toys. They're not some tool for personal gain." "Personal gain?" Mark shot back, his tone laced with sarcasm. "Let's not pretend you're not tempted by what they can do, James. You think you're the moral compass here, but we both know you're just as curious, just as hungry for knowledge. What if we could harness their power?" I couldn't take it anymore. "Both of you stop," I interjected, stepping between them. "This isn't helping us. We need to focus on understanding these crystals, not tearing each other apart. We're explorers, not gladiators." Mark's eyes narrowed, and I could see the flicker of something dark within them. "Understanding? You think we can just study them and everything will be fine? This is bigger than us, Sarah. These crystals could change the very fabric of reality. You can't be so naive." "You're the one being naive," I countered, feeling myself grow heated. "You're letting your ambition cloud your judgment. We have to approach this with caution. We can't let fear or greed dictate our actions." James nodded, visibly calming down. "Sarah's right, Mark. We need to put aside our differences and work together. If these stars truly have the power to alter reality, then we have a responsibility to treat them with respect. Let's focus on the science." Mark huffed, crossing his arms in defiance. "Fine. But just know that I won't let this opportunity slip away. If you two want to play it safe, that's your choice. I'm not afraid to take risks." "Then you need to think about what those risks could mean for all of us," James warned, his voice dropping to a solemn tone. "Let's get back to the crystalline star and collect more samples. We need to find out what we're really dealing with." As we prepared to return to the crystalline star, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The atmosphere was charged, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the calm before the storm. Mark's obsession was growing, and I feared it would lead to something catastrophic. Once we arrived near the star, the ship's sensors flared to life, illuminating the bridge with a cascade of colors. The crystals shimmered in their cosmic cradle, as if they were alive. I felt a strange pull towards them, an inexplicable urge to reach out and touch their surfaces, to understand their secrets intimately. "Let's begin," James said, his voice steady as he issued commands to the crew. "Lieutenant Thompson, prepare the extraction equipment. Sarah, I want you to monitor the energy fluctuations closely." As I settled into my station, I couldn't help but glance at Mark, who seemed overly eager, his fingers twitching as he calibrated the instruments. The way he looked at the crystals sent chills down my spine. "You know, if we can just extract a larger sample, We might be able to replicate their energy signatures, he mused, almost to himself. Let's stick to the plan, Mark, I reminded him, trying to keep my tone even. We need to analyze what we already have before getting ahead of ourselves. But he didn't seem to hear me. The moment the extraction beam activated, a low hum filled the air, resonating with the crystals. The vibrations intensified, and I felt the ship shudder ever so slightly. Something's wrong. I called out, my heart racing as alarms blared through the bridge. The readings are spiking. James gripped the edge of the control panel, his brow furrowing. What do you mean? What's happening? Before I could respond, the lights flickered and the ship jolted violently, throwing me against the console. Hold on. James shouted as he struggled to regain control. Engineering, report. Power fluctuations across multiple systems, Captain. Came the frantic voice of our engineer over the comms. We're losing stability. I scrambled back to my station, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before me. The extraction beam is destabilizing the star. We need to shut it down. I yelled, my fingers flying over the controls, but Mark was already one step ahead. No, he shouted, his eyes wide with manic excitement. We can't stop now. If we shut it down, we might lose our chance to understand the crystals. Mark, this is not the time to play hero. I yelled back, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We're in danger. James turned towards Mark, his expression hardening. You need to make a choice, Lieutenant. We're not risking the entire ship for your obsession. In that moment, the star erupted in a flurry of energy, sending shockwaves through the ship. The lights dimmed, and a blinding flash filled the cockpit, enveloping us in a surreal glow. Brace for impact. James shouted as he fought against the controls, but the force was too great. With a deafening roar, the ship was thrown off course, spiraling away from the crystalline star. I clung to my station, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to regain my bearings. Status report. James barked. Impact imminent. Came the engineer's voice again, panic lacing his tone. We're losing structural integrity. Mark, shut down the extraction beam. I pleaded, my voice breaking. We'll be obliterated. But Mark stood frozen, eyes fixated on the chaos unfolding before us. No, I can't. I need to see. Before he could finish, James lunged forward, his hands grabbing Mark's shoulders. You need to do it now. In that instant, Mark snapped back to reality, his expression shifting from obsession to terror. Okay, I'll shut it down. He rushed to the controls, fingers flying over the console. As the extraction beam powered down, the ship shuddered once more, and the energy fluctuations began to stabilize. The blinding light receded, revealing the crystalline star, still pulsating ominously. We need to get out of here, James said, urgency lacing his words. Now. But just as we began to regain control, I felt a sudden jolt, more powerful than before. What's happening? I cried out, eyes wide with fear. Mark's face went pale. I didn't shut it down completely. It's still resonating. Shit. We have to leave. James shouted, but it was too late. I watched in horror as the star began to destabilize, its crystalline surface fracturing and glowing brighter with each passing moment. Get us out of here. I screamed, my voice rising above the chaos. We need to initiate emergency thrusters. Just as I thought we might escape, Mark's eyes lit up with a desperate determination. I can't leave it like this, he yelled, rushing to the extraction console. Mark, don't. I pleaded, but he was already activating the equipment again, his determination blinding him to the danger. Mark, stop. You're putting us all at risk. James shouted, but Mark was beyond reason. The ship shook violently as the energy surged, and I felt the walls constrict around us. My heart raced as I realized we were running out of time. We need to go now. But Mark was consumed by his own ambition, a darkness lurking beneath the surface that I had only begun to understand. The ship trembled as we were caught in the wake of the star's impending explosion, and I could only hope that we would escape the chaos he had unleashed. I took a deep breath, the cold air of the Elysium's bridge filling my lungs as I stared out into the abyss of space. The crystalline star we had just fled from shimmered in the distance, a haunting reminder of our near brush with disaster. A heavy silence enveloped the room. I could feel the weight of my crew's uncertainty pressing down on us like a dense fog. We had barely escaped the explosion, and now I had a gnawing feeling in my gut that things would never be the same. "Captain," Sarah said, breaking the stillness. She was at her console, her fingers dancing over the screens, trying to make sense of the chaos. "We need to analyze the data we collected. There's so much we still don't understand about those crystals." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. What about Mark? I can't shake the feeling that he's hiding something. After everything that happened, we can't afford any more surprises. "Mark's acting strange, that's for sure," Sarah replied, glancing toward the dimly lit corner of the bridge where Mark often retreated. "I just wish he'd open up. We need to trust each other now more than ever if we're going to survive this." "Trust?" I scoffed, the bitterness in my voice surprising even myself. "How can we trust him when he's been so secretive? I can't let him jeopardize us again." My fists clenched at my sides as I felt the anger bubbling within me. But Sarah placed a hand on my arm, her touch grounding me. "Let's focus on what we know. If those crystals reacted to our fear and greed, then maybe we can start to understand their true nature. We have to find a way to turn this around." Her determination ignited a spark within me, and I took a moment to collect my thoughts. "All right, let's decode the star's energy patterns. If we can figure out how these crystals work, maybe we can neutralize any potential threat they pose." We worked together, poring over the data, the atmosphere on the bridge slowly shifting from tension to purpose. Hours passed, and I could feel the fatigue starting to set in, but we pressed on. The radiant glow of the crystalline star lingered in my peripheral vision, a constant reminder of the danger we were trying to comprehend. "Captain," Sarah called out suddenly, her voice trembling with excitement. "I think I've found something. If my calculations are correct, the energy emitted by these crystals can be harnessed, but it's highly unstable. They can either be a source of incredible power or a weapon of mass destruction, depending on how they're used. Then we need to ensure they don't fall into the wrong hands," I stated, feeling a sense of urgency wash over me. "We have to keep Mark away from them. He's already shown he's willing to take risks for his own gain." Just then, Mark stepped onto the bridge, his expression unreadable. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice casual. Yet I sensed an underlying tension. "Just analyzing the data we collected," I replied, my tone clipped. "You missed quite the show back there. I hope you're not planning to pull another stunt like that again." "I don't know what you're talking about," Mark said, crossing his arms defensively. "I'm just here to help." "Help?" I echoed, incredulity creeping into my voice. "You think your little escapades are helping? You put us all at risk." "Enough," Sarah interjected, stepping between us. "We're not going to get anywhere if we keep pointing fingers. We need to work together." I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger that threatened to boil over. "Fine, but I'm keeping a close eye on you, Mark. I won't let you jeopardize this mission again." He smirked, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. "Sure, Captain. Just remember, you don't know everything." As he walked away, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something was off about him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was up to something. The unease settled in my gut again, growing heavier. I turned back to Sarah, who was now focused on her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Let's get back to work," I said, trying to push aside my concerns. We spent the next few hours poring over the data, but the atmosphere remained charged with unspoken tension. "Captain," Sarah spoke again after a long silence, her voice low, "I can't help but wonder. If these crystals are sentient, as the logs from the Odyssey suggested, what happens when we try to control them? If they react to emotions, what if we're not prepared for that?" "Then we need to be prepared," I replied firmly. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to understand them, not conquer them." "I hope you're right," she said softly, her gaze drifting toward the shimmering star outside. "Because if we're not, we could unleash something beyond our control." The bridge fell silent as we both contemplated the weight of those words. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, an ominous vibration coursing through the hull. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered. "What the hell?" I shouted, quickly moving to my station. "Status report. Systems are failing." Sarah exclaimed, her fingers flying over the controls. "I can't stabilize the energy flow." Mark. I yelled, scanning the room for him. Get over here. We need all hands on deck. He appeared from the shadows, a smirk still on his face. Looks like your ship is falling apart, Captain. Enough with the games. I snapped. We need to fix this now. As we all scrambled to regain control, I could sense Mark's energy shifting. What did you do? I demanded, locking eyes with him. Did you mess with the systems? Maybe, he said with a nonchalant shrug. Or maybe it's just the crystals reacting to your fear. Fear. I scoffed. You think this is fear? You're playing a dangerous game, Mark. I'm not afraid, Captain. I'm curious, he replied, his voice low and enticing. And curiosity can lead to great power. Power. I echoed, my heart racing. You think you can control this? You're a fool. He took a step closer, his gaze locked onto mine. Maybe it's you who doesn't understand. I know what these crystals can do. I want to harness their potential. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but before I could respond, the ship lurched violently again, throwing us all off balance. Sarah. I shouted as I struggled to regain my footing. What's happening? I can't isolate the energy fluctuations, she cried, panic creeping into her voice. It's like the crystals are reacting to our emotions. Exactly. Mark said, a manic glint in his eyes. They're alive, Captain. And they want to be understood, by someone who's not afraid to take risks. Stop this. I shouted, my voice rising above the chaos. You're not thinking straight. But he was already moving to the control panel, fingers poised to activate the systems. I can harness their power. I can control them. No. I lunged forward, but it was too late. The moment his fingers made contact with the controls, a surge of energy erupted, enveloping him in a blinding light. James. Sarah screamed, and I felt a rush of fear as I watched Mark's figure flicker in and out of reality, the energy around him pulsating violently. I knew then that this was the moment we had been dreading, the culmination of all our fears and desires. And as I stood there, watching everything unravel, I realized that the real battle wasn't just against external forces, but against the darkness within ourselves. The moment Mark activated the ship systems, I felt a tremor run through the Elysium. The console lit up like an explosion of stars, flickering with chaotic energy. Mark, what are you doing? I shouted, panic threading my voice as I rushed toward him. He stood there, eyes wide, almost entranced by the shimmering interface before him. I can control it, James. I can harness the energy of the crystals, he replied, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and desperation. Just watch. But there was no watching. In that instant, a blinding light erupted from the console, enveloping him in a sphere of crackling energy. I was thrown backward, slamming against the bulkhead as the shockwave rippled through the ship. No. I yelled, scrambling to my feet. The air hummed with an otherworldly resonance, the entire ship vibrating as if it were alive. James. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She was at the other end of the control room, desperately trying to stabilize the ship systems. I glanced over at her, and what I saw sent a chill down my spine. Mark was no longer himself. The greed in his eyes had transformed into something darker, something primal. The crystalline stars outside pulsed in rhythm with his emotions, glowing brighter and brighter. Mark, stop. Sarah shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the cacophony of energy surging through the ship. The walls trembled as the energy field expanded, and I could see the crystals in the surrounding space glimmer, reacting to his turmoil. I can feel it, James. It's incredible. Mark's voice was laced with a manic enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. I can control it all. I can be more than I ever dreamed. Mark, you're losing yourself. I yelled, stepping closer, trying to break through to him. This isn't power, it's madness. But he was too far gone, the energy consuming him. A violent pulse of light erupted from the console, and I watched in horror as he was lifted off the ground, suspended in the air by a torrent of vibrant energy. The ship began to shake violently, alarms blaring as systems overloaded. James, help me! Mark cried, his voice a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Hold on. I shouted back, lunging forward to grab the emergency disconnect lever. I'm shutting it down. Just as I reached for it, another surge of energy blasted through the room, throwing me off my feet once more. I hit the ground hard, pain radiating through my body. "James!" Sarah yelled again, her face pale with fear. "We need to stabilize the ship or we'll be torn apart." I gritted my teeth, forcing myself up again. "We have to get Mark out of there," I shouted, but the energy was too volatile. Every time I tried to approach him, the force pushed me back, as if the crystals were protecting their host. "Mark!" I yelled, desperation fueling my voice. "You have to fight it. You're stronger than this." He looked at me, eyes wide, almost pleading. "James, I can't, it's too beautiful," he gasped, his voice cracking as if he were being torn between two worlds, the real and the ethereal. "Beautiful? This is madness." I shouted back, shaking my head. "You're losing yourself in it. You're becoming a part of it." And then, in a moment of clarity, I saw the truth in his eyes flicker, the spark of the man I once knew. "James, I don't want to let go," he cried, his voice a mix of anguish and longing. "Then don't. Fight it," I urged, and Sarah moved beside me, her hands flying over the controls, trying to reroute power to stabilize the systems. The ship lurched again, but I couldn't take my eyes off Mark, suspended in that dazzling prison of energy, caught between reality and a power that was never meant to be wielded. Suddenly, a pulse of energy surged through the room, and I felt an overwhelming force pulling at my very soul. I stumbled forward, instinctively reaching out to Mark. "You can do this, Mark. Remember who you are," I shouted, feeling the bonds of our friendship pulling me toward him. But the energy was too strong. With a final blinding flash, Mark was consumed by the light, his screams echoing in my ears until they were snuffed out like a dying star. The explosion of energy was deafening, a shockwave that knocked me and Sarah off our feet. When the blinding light faded, I found myself gasping on the floor of the control room, the air heavy with silence. I struggled to sit up, looking around in disbelief. The console was dark, the ship eerily still. "Mark!" I called out weakly, my heart racing. "James," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I turned to see her face, pale and haunted. "What just happened?" I shook my head, still in shock. I don't know." "He was consumed by it, Sarah." I stared at the now dim console, the reality of our situation crashing down on me. "The crystals, they're alive. They fed off his emotions." "Alive?" she echoed, her brow furrowing. "You think they're sentient?" I nodded, feeling a cold dread settle in my gut. They reacted to his greed, his desperation. We thought they were just objects of study, but they're more, much more. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just about exploration or power. We had stumbled upon something far beyond our understanding. "We have to put them back, Sarah. We can't let this happen again," I said, my voice steadying as I pushed myself to my feet. She looked at me, determination flickering in her eyes. "You're right. We need to return them to their star. It's the only way to contain them." We moved quickly, gathering the remaining samples and preparing the Elysium for departure. As we navigated through the darkened corridors, I felt a profound sense of loss for Mark. He had been one of us, and now he was gone, swallowed by the very force he sought to control. Once we reached the observation deck, I looked out at the crystalline stars, their beauty now tinged with an unsettling understanding. "They're watching us," I murmured, shivers running down my spine. "They know what happened." "They're not just stars, they're guardians of something greater," Sarah said softly. "And we were fools to think we could harness them." As we initiated the sequence to return the crystals to their origin, I felt the ship shudder with anticipation. The stars outside began to glow brighter, responding to our decision. "It's as if they're welcoming us back," I said, a sense of hope rising within me. "Maybe they want to teach us," Sarah replied, her gaze fixed on the brilliance of the stars. "To show us that true power lies in respect and harmony with the universe." With a final surge of energy, the crystals were released into the star's embrace. A wave of light enveloped the Elysium, and I closed my eyes, feeling a warmth wash over me. When I opened them again, the stars twinkled brightly, their glow a beacon of hope amid the vastness of space. As we charted a new course, I glanced at Sarah, a silent vow passing between us. We had learned a lesson. one that would forever change our understanding of power, responsibility, and the delicate balance of the universe. The crystalline stars, once a source of obsession, now symbolized a new beginning, a promise of harmony and respect. And as we sailed back into the cosmos, I couldn't shake the feeling that the stars were smiling down upon us, brighter than ever.